Totter leaned back in his command chair, absently running his claws through the coarse fur under his chin as he watched the latest solution to their blockade problem drift into formation. Humans. The very name sounded primitive, like something a cub would gurgle before learning proper speech. Their ships matched the impression, crude, angular things that looked like they'd been welded together from salvage yard scraps. "Status report on our new allies," he drawled, enjoying the way his bridge crew's whiskers twitched at his tone. They knew him well enough by now to appreciate his particular brand of gallows humor. His sensor officer, Rena, flicked her ears in amusement as she responded. 17 vessels, Captain, though I hesitate to call them proper warships. Their hull composition is primarily steel and titanium alloys," she ended with a questioning chirp, as if unsure of her own readings. "How delightfully archaic," Totter purred, his fangs showing in what passed for a smile among his people. "And their weapon systems?" "That's the strange part, sir," Rena continued, her tail lashing in confusion. "They appear to be running their engines far above any reasonable safety parameters, and their power distribution is, well, it's as if they're routing almost everything to propulsion and structural integrity." Totter barked out a laugh that made several junior officers jump. "So they plan to defeat the impenetrable blockade by, what, running away very quickly when they fail?" His tactical officer, an older veteran named Krev, spoke up with a rumbling growl. "According to their transmitted battle plans, they intend to engage at close range." He said it like he was describing someone planning to swim in raw sewage. "Of course they do." Totter sighed theatrically, spreading his arms wide. "Because when energy weapons, phase torpedoes, and quantum disruptors have all failed against the enemy's shields, surely the answer is to get nice and close. Perhaps they think they can scratch the enemy's paint with those crude hulls of theirs." The bridge crew shared a round of nervous laughter. They'd all seen too many failed attempts to break the blockade to believe this would be any different. But Totter had learned long ago that if you couldn't laugh at death, you'd go mad facing it so often. "Well," he announced, settling more comfortably into his chair, "at least these humans will provide us with some novel entertainment before they join the debris field. Rena, make sure you record everything. I want to be able to appreciate all the details of whatever spectacular failure they have planned." As he watched the ungainly human ships move into attack position, Totter couldn't help but admire their audacity, if nothing else. It took a special kind of stupid bravery to face impossible odds with obviously inferior technology. Perhaps that's why the Coalition had invited them to join. They needed some fresh meat for the grinder after so many of their own ships had been reduced to space dust. "Sir," Krev called out, his tone puzzled, "the humans are requesting detailed information about the enemy shield frequencies and harmonics." "Give it to them," Totter waved a paw dismissively. "I suppose they'd like to know what color they'll be glowing when they die. Let's be accommodating hosts for our newest sacrificial allies." As his crew compiled the data for transmission, Totter settled in to watch what would surely be another glorious failure to add to their growing collection. At least these humans seemed like they'd make it interesting. Sometimes that was the best you could hope for in this endless war. A good show before the end. Totter found himself oddly fascinated as he studied the approaching human fleet. Their formation, if one could even call it that, was unlike anything he'd seen in his 20 years of service. Rather than the elegant attack patterns favored by the Coalition, the humans had arranged their ships in what appeared to be a wedge. "Rena," he called out, "give me a detailed analysis of their lead vessel. I want to understand exactly what kind of catastrophe we're about to witness." His sensor officer's whiskers twitched as she compiled the data. "Sir, their design philosophy is peculiar. The vessel is essentially one massive engine system, with a reinforced hull attached. Nearly 60% of the ship's mass is dedicated to propulsion." "Fascinating," Totter purred, leaning forward. "They've built an engine with a ship attached, rather than a ship with engines. How charmingly primitive. What about their defensive systems?" Krev cut in, his gruff voice carrying a note of disbelief. That's the thing, Captain. They barely have any. Minimal shield generators, just enough to handle standard radiation and debris. Their hull, though. He trailed off, double-checking his readings. Don't keep us in suspense, old friend, Totter drawled. What masterwork of prehistoric engineering are we dealing with? It's layered, sir. Dozens of alternating sheets of different metal alloys with some kind of shock-absorbing material between them. The design makes no sense. It's like they built their ships to what? Totter prompted, enjoying his tactical officer's confusion. To break apart, sir. Krev's ears flattened against his skull. The layering, the compartmentalization, it's all designed to fragment in a controlled manner. A junior officer spoke up from her station. Captain, the humans are asking about the enemy fleet's mass and velocity calculations now. Totter barked out a laugh that echoed across the bridge. First shield frequencies, now basic physics. Next they'll be asking for the enemy's favorite colors and dietary preferences. He waved a paw airily. Send them whatever they want. I'm starting to enjoy their thorough approach to suicide. As the data was transmitted, Totter watched the human ships continue their plodding advance. Their engines were burning so hot that they showed up on sensors like miniature suns. But they weren't maneuvering for a standard attack run. They were just accelerating, steadily, relentlessly. Sir, Rena's voice had taken on an odd tone. I'm detecting power fluctuations in their fleet. They're routing even more energy to their engines. They've gone well beyond any safety protocols I've ever seen. How much more? Totter asked, his own ears perking up with genuine curiosity. All of it, sir. They're diverting power from everything, weapons, life support, even artificial gravity, just dumping it all into their engines. Totter sat back, running his claws through his fur thoughtfully. For the first time, he felt a slight tremor of uncertainty. This wasn't the behavior of a species planning to fight. This was something else entirely. Krev, he said slowly, given their current trajectory and acceleration, what exactly are they aimed at? His tactical officer's calculations took only moments. When he looked up, his eyes were wide. They're going to hit the center of the enemy formation, literally hit it. Surely not, Totter mused, though his tail had begun to twitch with anticipation. No one would be that, he paused, searching for the right word. Barbaric, Rena offered. A slow grin spread across Totter's face, showing all his fangs. Now that, my dear Rena, is an interesting choice of words. Perhaps we're about to learn why the Coalition was so eager to recruit these primitives after all. The enemy blockade loomed ahead, their shields shimmering with that same damned impenetrable energy that had thwarted every Coalition attack for years. Totter watched the human ships continue their headlong charge, still trying to puzzle out their strategy. They were moving faster now, much faster. Sir, Rena's voice had taken on a hint of awe. The humans have achieved relativistic velocities. They're still accelerating. Relativistic? Totter's ears flattened against his skull. At this range? They'll never be able to... The rest of his sentence died in his throat as the human's plan suddenly became crystal clear. His laugh started low, a rough chuckle that built into a full-throated roar of incredulous mirth. Oh, those beautiful bastards, he howled, slapping his armrest. They're not going to try to disable the shields at all. Krev's eyes widened in understanding. Sir, we should move to a safe distance. Now. Plot a course, Totter agreed, still chuckling. But keep our sensors locked on the show. I don't want to miss a moment of this. As their ship pulled back, the human fleet reached their terminal velocity. They hadn't fired a single shot. They hadn't deployed any fancy weapons. They had simply turned their ships into the most primitive weapons of all, really fast, really heavy objects. The enemy fleet's commanders must have finally realized what was happening. Their ships began to break formation, trying to evade, but they'd grown complacent behind their impenetrable shields, and their reactions were too slow. The first human ship struck an enemy cruiser dead center. Their primitive hull design suddenly made perfect sense as the layered metal sheets transformed the ship into a hypersonic shotgun blast. The enemy shields flared brilliantly, and then physics reminded everyone why it was the universe's undefeated champion. No shield, no matter how advanced, could absorb that much kinetic energy instantly. The enemy ship split in half as if cut by some giant's axe, secondary explosions blooming along its length. "Status report," Totter called out, his fur bristling with excitement. 15 direct hits, Krev barked, his professional demeanor cracking as his tail wagged frantically. "The enemy formation is completely broken. Their shields mean nothing against this." Totter watched in delighted disbelief as the human ships did exactly what their design suggested. They broke apart on impact, turning into clouds of hypersonic shrapnel that shredded everything in their path. The enemy's once impenetrable blockade was being systematically torn to pieces by what amounted to very fast, very expensive bullets. "Rena," he purred, "please tell me you're recording every beautiful moment of this." "Every angle, sir," she replied, her own voice trembling with a mix of horror and admiration. "Though I doubt anyone would believe it without proof." The bridge crew watched in stunned silence as decades of advanced energy shield technology proved utterly useless against humanity's embrace of physics' first and simplest solution. "Hit it hard, hit it fast." A message came through from the Coalition command. "All ships, form up on the breach point. Push through while they're scattered." Totter felt his blood sing with the thrill of imminent combat. "Well, my friends, it seems we finally have our opening. Let's not waste the humans' magnificent sacrifice." As they brought their ship around to join the attack, Krev spoke up quietly. "Sir, I'm detecting emergency beacons from the human ships." "What?" Totter's ears perked forward. "But they just—" "Ejection pods, sir," Rena confirmed. "Launched just before impact. Most of their crews are alive." Totter stared at the tactical display, watching the pod's beacons blink steadily amid the expanding debris field. Then he threw back his head and laughed harder than he had in years. "They built ships designed to be destroyed," he gasped between fits of laughter, "and made sure they could survive abandoning them. These humans, these absolutely magnificent barbarians." As his ship moved to join the attack, Totter made a mental note to buy every surviving human crew member a drink. After all, it wasn't every day you got to watch someone turn space combat back into rock throwing and win. The Coalition fleet surged through the gap torn in the enemy blockade, and Totter found himself grinning like a cub on hunt day. His ship's sensors were still tracking the scattered debris of the human impact, debris that was still moving fast enough to pose a serious navigation hazard. The sheer elegance of it made his whiskers quiver with joy. Krev called out. The enemy had recovered enough to start mounting a defense, but their formation was in shambles. "Show me the debris field overlay," Totter ordered, an idea forming. "Rena, plot me a course that intersects with the highest concentration of human ship fragments." His sensor officer's ears perked up as she caught his meaning. "Using their shrapnel cloud as cover, sir?" "The humans gave us such a lovely gift," Totter purred. "It would be rude not to use it." Their ship dove into the expanding field of metallic fragments. Enemy fire slackened immediately. Their targeting systems couldn't get a clean lock through the cloud of high-velocity debris. More importantly, their precious shields were constantly flickering as they tried to deal with the 1,000 tiny impacts per second. "Multiple hull impacts," Rena reported calmly. "All superficial. The human debris is acting as chaff the enemy can't get a weapons lock." Totter's claws clicked against his armrest in satisfaction. "Krev, target the nearest enemy vessel. Let's show them some proper Coalition hospitality while their shields are occupied with our human friends' leftovers." Their shots struck true, catching the enemy ship just as its shields flickered from debris impacts. The explosion was thoroughly satisfying. "Sir," a junior officer called out. "Coalition Command is ordering all ships to follow our example. They're calling it the Barbaric Gambit." That set Totter off again, his laughter mixing with the thunder of impacts against their hull. "Oh, that's perfect! We're all barbarians now." The battle devolved into something that would have given traditional naval tacticians fits. Coalition ships were diving into the debris clouds left by the human impacts, using the shrapnel as impromptu cover and shield breakers. The enemy's advanced targeting systems and shields, their greatest advantages, had been transformed into vulnerabilities by humans who'd chosen to weaponize basic physics. Multiple enemy ships breaking formation, Krev reported, his gruff voice carrying an unmistakable note of glee. "They're trying to retreat to safer space." "Chase them down," Totter ordered. "But keep us in this lovely cloud of human-made chaos. I haven't had this much fun in years." As they pursued the fleeing enemy, Totter noticed something that made his fur stand on end with delight. The human debris wasn't just acting as cover. The fragments were still moving so fast that they were actually causing serious damage to the enemy ship's structural integrity. The humans hadn't just made bullets out of their ships. They'd created an expanding kill zone that was continuing to fight even after the initial impacts. "Rena," he called out, "make sure you're getting detailed scans of how this debris field is behaving. When we get back to base, I want to propose some modifications to our own hull design." "Going to embrace your inner barbarian, sir?" she asked, whiskers twitching with amusement. "My dear," Totter replied, watching another enemy ship's shields fail under the combined assault of coalition weapons and human debris, "I believe we've all just received a masterclass in the art of sophisticated barbarism. It would be a shame not to learn from it." Their ship shuddered as they caught the edge of an explosion. Through the tactical display, Totter watched the battlefield with an artist's appreciation. The elegant dance of energy weapons and shield harmonics had been replaced by something far more primal and far more effective. The humans had reminded them all that sometimes the simplest solution was just to throw a really big rock really hard. "You know," he mused as they lined up another shot on a struggling enemy vessel, "I don't think I'll ever look at a primitive design the same way again. Clearly, I've been entirely too dismissive of the creative applications of barbarism." In the battle's aftermath, Totter stood at his viewport, watching recovery vessels carefully navigating through clouds of still dangerous debris to collect the human ejection pods. His ship had acquired an impressive collection of new scars, each one earned while dancing through that beautiful maelstrom of weaponized wreckage. "Final after-action reports coming in, sir," Rena announced from her station. Her fur was mussed from the long hours, but her eyes were bright with excitement. "Give me the highlights," Totter replied, not turning from the viewport. "I'm still appreciating the artwork our human friends created." 87% of human crews successfully recovered from ejection pods, she began. "Enemy losses are, well, sir, they're catastrophic. 17 human ships managed to destroy or disable 43 enemy vessels, not counting the secondary casualties from debris impacts." Totter's whiskers twitched. "And the cost analysis?" "That's the most interesting part, sir," Krev cut in, joining the conversation. "Even counting the complete loss of all human vassals, we spent less resources than in any previous attempted breakthrough. Their ships were, well, they were cheap." "Of course they were," Totter chuckled. "They weren't building warships at all. They were building ammunition. Very large, very sophisticated ammunition." He turned from the viewport, his eyes gleaming. "Tell me, what's the most complex part of a bullet?" His officers exchanged glances. "Sir?" "The firing mechanism," he answered his own question. "The bullet itself is just a lump of metal designed to fly straight and transfer energy effectively. We've spent years trying to build better guns, while the humans just decided to be the bullet." A junior officer approached with a data pad. "Sir, preliminary analysis of the debris field dynamics. You wanted to see it immediately?" Totter snatched the pad eagerly, his tail swishing as he scrolled through the data. "Look at this," he purred. The layered hull design didn't just fragment on impact. It was designed to fragment in a specific pattern. The humans turned their ships into shotgun shells that fired more shotgun shells. "But sir," Rena interjected, "it's so primitive." Just hitting things really hard?" "Ah, but that's where we've all been stupid," Totter replied, beginning to pace the bridge excitedly. "We've spent so long trying to be clever that we forgot to be effective. Look at our weapons. Energy beams that can be deflected, torpedoes that can be jammed, exotic particles that can be dispersed. But kinetic energy?" He barked out a laugh. "You can't hack physics." He pulled up the tactical replay on the main display, showing the moment of first impact. "We've evolved past our barbaric origins, learned to fight with technology and finesse. And that's good. That's progress. But the humans," he gestured at the screen where a human ship was transforming into a cone of destruction. "They kept that primordial knowledge. They remembered that sometimes you just need to hit something hard enough that it stops being a problem." "The Coalition is already requesting design specifications," Krev noted. "They want to start incorporating human hull layering techniques into our own ships." "Of course they are," Totter grinned. "We're all going to become barbarians now. But you know what the truly clever part is?" He held up the data pad. "This isn't primitive technology at all. The mathematics behind these hull designs, the precision engineering required to create controlled fragmentation patterns, it's actually incredibly sophisticated. The humans just used all that sophistication to do something wonderfully simple." He sat back in his command chair, still scrolling through the debris analysis. "We thought being civilized meant moving past physical solutions, but the humans showed us that true sophistication is knowing when to embrace our barbaric roots. They built ships designed to die, crews trained to abandon them at the perfect moment, and turned certain defeat into victory by choosing violence of the most fundamental sort." "Sir?" Rena said hesitantly. "Coalition Command wants your recommendations for incorporating these tactics into our standard doctrine." Totter's grin showed all his fangs. "Tell them we're going to need bigger engines and a lot more metal." He paused, then added, "And see if you can get me a meeting with the human commanders once they're recovered. I have so many wonderfully barbaric ideas to discuss with them." 3 months after what was now being called the Rams of Reckoning by the Coalition media, Totter found himself in the shipyards, watching construction crews retrofit his vessel with a human-inspired layered hull system. The modifications had nearly doubled the ship's mass, but the new engine systems, another human innovation, more than compensated. Thunk, thunk, thunk. Totter's ears swiveled toward the distinctive sound of wood striking metal deck plating. Commander Jack Harrison appeared around the corner, his vintage wooden leg marking each step with what he insisted was proper seafaring authority. The human had lost his leg during the battle when his ejection pod clipped some debris, but rather than accept modern medical cybernetics, he'd opted for what he called a classical approach. "Beautiful day for shipbuilding," Harrison called out. His beard split by a wide grin, the human commander patted his wooden leg. "Nothing like the sound of a proper peg leg on a warship's deck. Reminds me of the great age of piracy back home." "Your species actually had an entire historical period dedicated to pirates?" Totter's whiskers twitched with amused interest. "Oh, yeah," Harrison beamed, clearly in his element. "Wooden ships, black flags, wooden legs just like this beauty." He rapped his knuckles against the prosthetic. "When they offered me some fancy cybernetic replacement, I thought to myself, what better way to honor our barbaric heritage?" "Your dedication to historical authenticity is admirable," Totter purred, watching as Harrison smoothly navigated the observation deck. "Though I must admit, watching half the Coalition fleet being rebuilt as high-velocity projectiles is not something I expected to see in my lifetime." Harrison laughed, leaning against the railing. "You should see what we're working on next. Ever heard of a concept called chain reaction?" "Do tell." Totter's ears perked forward with interest. They began walking along the deck, passing dozens of ships in various stages of reconstruction, Harrison's wooden leg marking their pace with its steady rhythm. "You know how our ship's debris continued to cause damage after the initial impact?" Harrison's eyes gleamed with what Totter had learned to recognize as distinctly human mischief. We're developing a hull coating that becomes explosively energetic at relativistic speeds. Imagine each fragment creating its own expanding sphere of high-velocity shrapnel. Your species' dedication to making things more thoroughly destroyed is admirable. Totter's laugh echoed through the shipyard. Though I must ask, why do you insist on keeping that primitive prosthetic? Surely it's less efficient. Less efficient? Harrison thumped his wooden leg proudly. Maybe, but let me tell you something about human history, friend. Sometimes the old ways have a power all their own. Every thunk reminds me and everyone else that humans never completely left our barbaric roots behind. We just got better at choosing when to embrace them. They paused at a viewport, watching a team of engineers installing what looked like deliberately designed fracture points in a cruiser's hull. The ship's former elegant lines had been replaced with angular armor plates and reinforced impact zones. You know what the really funny part is? Harrison mused, absent-mindedly adjusting his peg leg. Some of the coalition analysts are calling this a regression in warfare technology, as if making something simpler automatically makes it less advanced. A flash of light caught their attention. In the distance, a test vessel had just completed a controlled impact against a targeted asteroid. The resulting explosion was far larger than mere kinetic energy should have allowed. Ah, Harrison smiled. I see, they're testing the new energetic coating. Magnificent, Totter breathed, watching fragments of both ship and asteroid continue to spread in a devastating wave. We spent so many generations trying to move beyond our savage origins, and it took humans, who still celebrate their ancient pirates, to show us that being barbaric isn't the opposite of being advanced. Speaking of ancient ways made new, Harrison's grin turned predatory. Want to see the preliminary designs for what we're calling smart shrapnel? I want to see the preliminary designs for what we're calling smart... Totter's ears perked up. Self-guided fragments? Better, Harrison said, his wooden leg thumping with enthusiasm as he turned toward the planning center. Self-replicating ones, like the old pirates used to say, why take one piece of 8 when you can take it all? My dear Commander, Totter purred, falling into step beside the human's rhythmic gait. I do believe this is the beginning of a beautifully barbaric partnership. Please, tell me more about humanity's next lesson in sophisticated savagery. I find your species' dedication to historical barbarism increasingly educational. As they walked away, the thunk of Harrison's peg leg echoing through the shipyard, Totter glanced back at his ship one last time. Its new armor gleamed dully under the shipyard lights, no longer sleek and elegant, but somehow more beautiful for its honest brutality. The coalition was evolving, not backward toward barbarism, but forward into a new understanding of warfare, where sophistication and savagery were no longer opposing forces. And it had only taken a few humans, who still celebrated their pirate heritage with wooden legs and black powder weapons, to show them the way. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave it a like and to subscribe if you'd like to see more. Feel free to comment and share it as well. With all that said, go on and check out the video in the top left. I think you might like it.